Hey everyone! Tonight we are going to follow a lone trekker deep into a plateau jungle where danger waits beneath every leaf and vine, and survival hinges on courage, resourcefulness, and the will to live against all odds. We'll witness the moment a venomous snake strikes the frantic fight to control spreading poison and the unexpected bonds that form in life's darkest hour. This story is more than an adventure. It's a testament to human resilience when nature's deadliest hazards converge. So before we get started, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can keep making better videos. Now enjoy a cup of hot tea and let's embark on this journey together tonight. The early morning mist clung to the plateau's fern-carpeted floor like a translucent veil, hiding whispering streams and treacherous roots. High above ancient strangler figs towered their buttressed bases, entwined in a slow dance with lianas that dripped with moisture. Marcus Caldwell inhaled a lungful of humid air, heart thrumming with anticipation. This expedition, his most ambitious solo venture yet, had drawn him deep into uncharted jungle, miles from any known trailhead. Each footfall echoed on damp earth, the rhythmic crunch of dried leaf litter, offset by the soft susurrations of insects waking to dawn. His pack settled comfortably against his back. Inside lay the bare essentials, a lightweight tarp water purification tablets, a compact med kit, and a well-worn journal. He'd spent weeks researching the plateau's subtropical microclimates, mapping seasonal rainfall, and studying local fauna, and yet nothing replaced the raw thrill of stepping into the wild unknown. As he adjusted the brim of his hat, sunlight pierced the foliage in golden shafts, illuminating motes of airborne pollen. A symphony of birdsong greeted him, hornbills calling from a distant ridge, crimson sunbirds flitting over flowering shrubs, and the insistent trill of cicadas hidden within trunks. Marcus paused beside an ancient mahogany tree, running a gloved hand over its bark mottled scarred by centuries of storms. He jotted a quick sketch in his journal, annotating leaf shape and undergrowth density, evidence of the plateau's unique ecosystem. Every detail mattered. Knowledge gleaned here could mean the difference between comfort and calamity. Even so, his chest tightened with an undercurrent of vulnerability. The rainforest, for all its beauty, harbored predators both visible and unseen, stalking big cats, swarms of stinging insects, and venomous serpents that reveled in camouflage. He checked his watch. Just past dawn. With each rising minute, the sun's warmth would intensify, humidity would climb, and shadows would shrink. He navigated along a narrow game trail, the ground moist but firm, ignoring the occasional glint of insectile eyes beneath ferns. A breeze stirred, carrying the tang of damp wood and the faint sweetness of blossoming orchids. Sweat formed at his hairline, and he loosened the top button of his shirt, mindful to preserve barrier over any exposed skin. Marcus paused at a fork where two faint paths diverged. One trailed toward a moss-covered outcrop. The other led downhill to a tributary he planned to map later. He chose the higher route drawn by a promise of panoramic view. As he climbed, roots curled around his boots like coiled snakes, and humid air pressed against him like an unseen weight. At last, He reached a rocky ledge, breath scattering in tiny clouds. Below the plateau stretched interminably emerald waves of canopy, broken by occasional clearings where sunlight birthed swaths of ferns. He set down his pack to drink from a flask, cool water soothing dry lips. Drawing a deeper breath, he let the jungle's vastness settle in. Here, stripped of civilization's comforts, every sense sharpened. His ears picked out a distant hammering, woodpeckers excavating sap-filled trunks. His nose detected the faint, acrid tang of decaying leaves. Above clouds gathered at the horizon, heralding midday storms that could flood the forest floor in an instant. But Marcus felt alive. He clicked his compass, aligned it with a distant ridge, and plotted his next waypoint. The expedition had two goals: document rare orchid species at the plateau's heart and survey newly reported animal tracks near a jade-green lagoon. Both tasks carried risk, yet he had come prepared for months. His pack included snakebite kits, sturdy gaiters, and a handheld radio tuned to a satellite uplink. He was determined not just to survive, but to thrive, even if fate tested him at every turn. With fresh resolve, Marcus hoisted his pack and moved on, leaving footprints that would vanish within hours under the jungle's hungry growth. Every step brought him deeper into mystery, closer to the unknown. In this realm of verdant beauty and hidden peril, his heart pounded with both wonder and apprehension. The plateau jungle had welcomed its guest, and sooner or later it would demand its due. Marcus traced his path through an understory thick with creeping palms and stilt roots, senses alert to the jungle's whispered warnings. He had heard tales from locals of the plateau snake species, deadly vipers, that lay in ambush beneath mottled leaf litter, their patterned scales rendering them nearly invisible. Now each crackle of twigs underfoot sent a shiver up his spine. He skirted around a fallen log alert for the faint sound of shifting bodies and pressed a finger to his earpiece, confirming the radio remained silent, a reassuring lifeline turned mute in this remote expanse. A few paces later, Marcus paused again. There, caught between sap-stained bark and wet leaves, lay a pale sheath of translucent skin. He crouched gingerly, touching the delicate cast-off shell. "Shed viper skin," he murmured. Voice hushed as he photographed it with his wrist-mounted camera. The segmentation of the scales, the faint ridge pattern, all indicated a juvenile Malayan pit viper, a species whose venom contained potent hemotoxins capable of causing internal bleeding and tissue necrosis. His practiced eyes noted the direction of the shed, pointing deeper into the grove. He stood, heartbeat accelerating, and scanned the surrounding ferns. A half-buried track, two fine serpentine grooves imprinted in soft mud, wove off to the left. Rain from last night had softened the soil, capturing unmistakable outlines of scales. Though the tracks were faint, they were fresh, at most an hour old. Marcus's pulse quickened as he recognized the whisk he was treading into the snake's hunting ground. Beneath an arch of pandanus leaves clusters of fruit-eating bats roosted by day, attracting rodents that in turn lured vipers hungry for an easy meal. He thumbed a button on his radio, hoping to hail base camp, but only static replied. even with satellite uplink dense canopy sometimes blocked transmissions. He exhaled slowly, centering himself. Proceed with caution, he told himself, recalling the survival guide's advice. Every foot lifted should clear twice the length of his boot. Every step should avoid disturbing debris. He bent at the knees, moving with deliberate precision, scanning the ground and the shadows cast by twisted vines. An abrupt rustle echoed ahead. Marcus froze. Leaves quivered, and two glossy black eyes blinked at him from the undergrowth. Not snake eyes, but a startled mongoose darting away with a chittering alarm. Relief washed over him, followed instantly by tension. If the mongoose fled, predators would follow. He kept his breathing measured, concentrated on the way the light danced across the forest floor, an undulating mosaic of sunlit patches and inky darkness. 30 yards on, he came upon a shallow depression filled with rainwater, its surface glassy and reflective. He knelt, cup-handfulling water to test for clarity before sipping. Then his gaze dropped to the opposite bank, where a half-bird coil lay motionless. His heart skipped. The viper lay curled in ambush, its cryptic dorsal pattern perfectly mimicking the Hessian moss and fallen palm needles. Marcus froze, mind racing. Snakes could strike explosively within inches, fangs injecting venom in a fraction of a second. Calm ruled his next movements. He withdrew a compact mirror from his vest pocket, angling it to get a better view of the snake's head. Its triangular form and heat-sensing pits beneath the eyes confirmed the worst. The viper's tongue flicked, sampling the air. A gust rippled through the canopy, stirring leaves that fluttered across the deadly coil. Marcus stifled a shudder. Had he taken half a step to the right, his foot would have crushed the viper's fragile camouflage. He removed a small item from his belt, a vial of specially formulated snake aversion scent, part of his experimental field kit. With a steady hand, he dabbed a few drops onto a folded cloth, then leaning far backward, tossed it toward a mossy tree trunk some 20 feet away. The scent dispersed in a faint plume. He waited, heart-thumping, as the viper uncoiled and slid away, seeking safer territory. When its glossy scales vanished into the shadowed brush, Marcus allowed himself to breathe, yet the encounter left him deeply unsettled. He wiped sweat from his brow and brushed his sleeve tentatively across his pants, aware now, with every nerve in his body, of unseen watchers. The Plateau jungle had spoken its warning. The next sign might not be benign. He checked his watch. Mid-morning sun filtered through the canopy, time slipping away toward the oppressive heat of midday. Snake activity often increased with rising temperatures. He needed to move quickly, but carefully. He reoriented his compass, noting that his planned route intersected a low ridge known for its rare orchids. But the ridge also featured rocky outcrops, ideal sun-warmed ambush sites for vipers. Caution now tempered his curiosity. He slowed each step, a controlled motion, avoiding fallen limbs that could conceal danger. His boots made soft thuds against the soil as he navigated a labyrinth of roots and broad-leaved vines, senses alert to any irregularity in the carpet of detritus. Shadows shifted. A subtle breeze carried the scent of wild ginger and decaying fruit. A high-pitched hiss, faint yet unmistakable, brushed past his ear. Marcus froze, feeling the hair stand at the back of his neck. Around him, ferns trembled. Then silence returned, ominous in its calm. He edged forward, scanning for the source. Beneath a cluster of bromeliads, he spotted the snake's hooded silhouette, coiled ready to strike again. This time, he would not gamble on a distance throw. He drew a lightweight trekking pole, extending it lengthwise, to tap the ground ahead. The rattle of the pole against stone and wood startled the viper, which slithered away into thicker undergrowth. Even so, Marcus felt his pulse still throbbing in his temples. He eased the pole back inward and stowed it, reminding himself that inaction was the greatest risk. Hesitation could lead to a misstep in these ambush territories. Minutes later, he reached a small clearing where sunlight bathed a limestone outcrop blanketed in pastel blooms. The beauty was disarming, a cluster of slipper orchids in fuchsia and ivory, their delicate petals unfurling like dancers' skirts. Marcus knelt to photograph them, exclaiming softly at their surreal appearance. Yet even as he marveled, his mind tracked the earlier encounters. He surveyed the area for more snake signs, no shed skin, no fresh tracks. Still, he kept a vigilant eye on the shadows cast by the orchid's broad leaves. He clicked his camera shutter several times, careful not to linger too long in this potentially hazardous vantage point. His journal emerged again as he jotted notes: bloom, count humidity, reading GPS coordinates. All the while, he felt the jungle's pressure mounting its droning chorus, urging him onward, reminding him that beauty and danger were inseparable here. Finally, Marcus packed his gear and rose. Ahead lay a narrow saddle between two ridges, a shortcut to the jade-green lagoon. The saddle offered a chance to gain elevation and a sweeping view, but also risked exposing him to sun-warmed rocks favored by snakes sunning themselves. He squared his shoulders and steeled his resolve. Carrying the memory of two near strikes in his mind, he moved toward the saddle with acute caution. As he climbed, each patch of sunlit rock prompted an involuntary pause. He tapped surfaces with his trekking pole, scanning crevices before placing a boot. At one point, he froze only a few feet ahead. A juvenile viper slithered across a sunlit slab, scales glinting as it fled into a crack. The sight caused his stomach to churn, both from awe and dread. He allowed himself a breath of relief. It had chosen flight over fight, but the encounter highlighted the plateau's unyielding claim to its terrain. By the time he reached the top of the saddle, Marcus's shirt was damp with sweat, and his muscles carried the tension of constant alertness. He paused on a mossy boulder, gazing down at the shimmering lagoon below. A ribbon of fog drifted across its surface, lending it an otherworldly sheen. He tapped his earpiece again, still no signal. The plateau had swallowed his communications as thoroughly as it concealed its vipers. He checked his kit, snake aversion scent, nearly spent grip on his trekking pole tight. He rotated his head slowly, ears straining for any hiss or rustle. Then he stepped forward, careful with every joint and tendon, determined to reach the lagoon and complete his survey. The jungle had whispered its peril. Marcus had listened. Yet the hidden menace remained slithering silently beneath every fern frond, Waiting for the moment when vigilance faltered, Marcus crested the saddle's narrow spine, every sinew taut with concentration. The jade-green lagoon beckoned below its glassy surface, mirroring the jungle's emerald vault. He took a deliberate step onto a sun-warmed rock, the heat seeping through his boot sole. His trekking pole tapped ahead in practiced rhythm, tap pause shift when the world shattered in a single, searing jolt. A loud crack echoed through his skull as a white-hot lance of agony tore through his right calf. Marcus's body convulsed, vaulting him backward off balance. His trekking pole slipped from numbed fingers, clattering against stone. He landed on his back, gasping for breath, the wind expelled from his lungs by a merciless wave of pain. Dazed, he stared at the sky, green leaves scorching in jagged patterns against azure. Every pulse in his leg pulsed like a struck gong. The snake Marcus never saw it. One moment, he'd felt nothing but the rock's warmth. The next, ice-cold terror. The pain blazed along his nerve endings, screaming in every fiber. Reflexively, he ripped his pant leg aside to reveal 2 bleeding puncture wounds, dark droplets blossoming on his skin. Nearby the juvenile Malayan pit, Viper lay coiled, head raised, tongue flicking an unspoken finality before it disappeared into a crack. Marcus tried to lift himself, but his limbs trembled uncontrollably. He pressed his hand against the punctures, teeth marks wickedly spaced less than an inch apart. Time splintered into shards of panic and hyper-awareness. His breathing came in ragged gasps as adrenaline flooded his system, dulling the edge of the pain even as his vision blurred. The first seconds after a snakebite mattered most. With hemotoxic venom, muscles would stiffen, blood could clot or hemorrhage internally. He had to act, and quickly. He fumbled for his radio fingers, slick with sweat and grime. His vision swooped downward in arcs, splitting the world into kaleidoscopic fragments. He forced his hand to stay steady, flipping open the radio's latch. Mayday. Medic, he rasped, voice ragged. Static greeted him. The absence of response folded around him like suffocating ivy. He pressed again, but the network lay dead. No lifeline, no rescue. Marcus's chest tightened as nausea churned at the edge of consciousness. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, picturing his mother's face, her soft encouragements when he first learned to hike. He pictured his father's steady hands showing him how to tie a secure knot. He pictured the first page of his journal at home, blank, waiting for his safe return. Those memories steadied his pulse. He tore open his med kit with his free hand. The flurry of ripping Velcro and tumbling supplies registered hazily. He located the snakebite kit. He'd packed a suction device, antiseptic wipes, and a pair of latex gloves. Heart hammering, he rested the glove on, despite trembling fingers. The pain flared with each movement, but his hands snapped into mechanical precision. He swabbed the bite area clean, though the antiseptic burned like acid on raw skin. Then lifting the suction cup, he pressed it firmly over the punctures. A quick pump created a vacuum, an imperfect but essential attempt to extract venom before it coursed through his bloodstream. He counted 30 pumps by the crystalline droplets that gathered inside the clear chamber. Already the muscle around the bite site felt heavy, and unresponsive as though weighted by invisible chains. He ripped a length of cord from his pack for a tourniquet. Knotting it above the bite, he twisted a small branch against the cord, tightening until the throbbing pulse below slowed but didn't cut off entirely a delicate balance. He glanced at his watch. 20 minutes had passed since the strike. Every tick reminded him of venom's rapid spread. His mouth went dry, thirst pressed at his throat. Marcus drew in a shuddering breath and wiped his brow, sweat mixed with antiseptic stinging his eyes. He stabilized himself on one elbow, surveying the ridge. Below, the lagoon lay still oblivious to his plight. Around him, the jungle carried on its ancient song, no bird song, just a low, omnipresent hum of insects and distant cascades of water. He swallowed hard, tasting copper in his mouth. He fumbled for the small vial of analgesic in his kit, breaking the glass and drawing the dark liquid into a syringe. He drove the needle into his thigh, injecting a dose that would ease the worst of the pain without risking shock. The burn of the injection punctuated the bite's agony with a new subcutaneous sting. He exhaled through gritted teeth, waiting for the dull buzz of relief. Then the consequences hit: giddiness, the world tilting on its axis. Marcus closed his eyes, head lolling. Any slower, and he would slip into unconsciousness. He forced himself upright, propping his pack against a nearby boulder, its straps strangely heavy now. Likelihood, he'd underestimated how fast venom worked. He reached for his water bladder, sipping with careful moderation. The fluid soothed a parched throat, but his stomach roiled. His training kicked in: immobilize, monitor, conserve. Remove nothing but necessaries, restrict movement, stay calm. But calm seemed as distant as civilization itself. He traced shallow breaths, counting slowly: 1, 2, 3. His vision sharpened briefly. The analgesic began to dull the primal flare of pain. Good. He could think again. He rifled through his pack until he found the compact mirror. Holding it at arm's length, he scanned his leg. Bruising bloomed around the bite skin, reddening in an angry halo. Swelling was subtle, yet rapid. He knew within an hour his calf would balloon to twice its size if untreated. His phone lay inside his pack, but battery conservation forbade powering it on until necessary. He'd use the phone to send a distress signal when he decided to move. All around him, the jungle waited. A low rustling behind him made his heart lurch. He turned still, wearing latex, and brandished his trekking pole. A band of small monkeys chattered in alarm as they dashed through the trees, harmless but no comfort. The forest offered no sympathy. He leaned back, using a rock as a makeshift seat. His mind raced. The nearest medical outpost lay 12 miles away, down steep ridges and across the lagoon's far shore. He could try to hike out, but each step risked pumping venom faster. He could wait for nightfall and attempt a crawl, but temperatures would plummet, and he lacked adequate insulation. Leaving his gear behind meant sacrificing critical supplies. He weighed options as pain lanced with every heartbeat. Gradually, his breathing steadied. He focused on each intake of air, each sensation of muscle fiber clenching. He recited landmarks in his mind: the stone arch 2 miles back, the waterfall where he cached extra water. If he could make it to that waterfall before dusk, he would refill and send a signal. Then maybe rescue would come before venom overwhelmed him. He tested his calf's movement. Minimal response. Good, it meant venom hadn't fully immobilized him yet. He carefully unknotted the tourniquet, loosening it just enough to let a faint pulse pass, but not enough to risk venous return. He observed the bite for fresh bleeding. None. He reapplied the cord slightly lower, maintaining the cauterizing effect without crushing tissue. The balance was precarious, but necessary. Marcus sat for several more minutes, catching fragments of strength. Sweat beaded on his brow. The jungle's heat pressed in. He patted his pockets until he found the small packet of emergency electrolyte powder, a luxury but critical now. He mixed it in his flask, stirring with a twig until foaming fizz mirrored the lake's restless surface. Each sip tasted of survival. He allowed himself a tight smile. Pain still throbbed like a drumbeat, but he had acted swiftly, improvised applied training, and bought himself time. Time would either be his ally or his undoing. He rose with deliberate calm, readjusting his pack. His leg protested a leaden weight, but he planted his trekking pole firmly for support. One cautious step, tap with the pole shift weight, then another. His gait was halting each movement, a negotiation between will and weakened muscle. He set his course back toward the saddle's opposite slope, where the waterfall offered both water and a vantage point for a distress call. With his right hand gripping the pole, left hand steadying his pack's strap, he began his descent into uncertainty. Marcus leaned into each step, the trekking pole's tip braced against loose stones as he descended toward the waterfall's distant roar. His chest tightened with each careful movement, yet adrenaline surged through him in wild pulses, drowning out the rhythmic pain in his calf. He refused to admit how close he'd come to surrender under the viper's strike. Instead, he told himself this was merely a setback, an inconvenient pothole on the road to survival. Sunlight fractured through the foliage above, flickering across his face as he navigated a narrow ledge. Somewhere ahead, moss-draped ferns gave way to the spray of tumbling water. Marcus tracked that sound like a compass bearing conviction, hardening in his veins. He painted his reality in reassuring strokes. The worst is over. I've stabilized the venom. I'll make it. With each mantra, his pace quickened despite the protest of muscle and sinew. He reached a gully where daylight sheeted over rocks in liquid ribbons. Water droplets hung suspended in air, refracting rainbow flecks into his peripheral vision. The waterfall plunged into a jade pool below its steady pounding, a reassuring heartbeat. Marcus exhaled relief, flooding every nerve. He wiped his brow, tasting mineral tang on his lips, and fought the dizziness that threatened to pull him down. Positioned on a flat boulder just upstream, he unpacked the satellite phone from its waterproof pouch. His fingers shook, part fear, part fatigue, but he pressed the power button. A series of beeps affirmed the device's fragile life. He navigated the tiny menu, heart hammering. He composed a terse message: snakebite, Bombay Plateau, need medical evac, leg hemotoxic, will stay at waterfall, ETA darkness. He hit send, praying the water-splashed canopy wouldn't swallow the signal again. A single check mark appeared. Euphoria tripped through him. Communication achieved. Rescue would come. He slung the phone back into its pouch and deactivated it to save battery. Each small triumph he acknowledged as proof his body remained under his command. He tightened the straps on his pack, scenting triumph like the aftertaste of victory. Yet in that instant of hope, an errant thought ricocheted through his mind. What if no one came? He chalked that away under a surge of defiance. No, this was fear talking, and he wasn't afraid. Not now, not ever. He rose, celebrating with a sudden stretch that jolted the bite sight. A flare of pain lanced his calf, wrenching a gasp from his throat. His teeth gritted instinctively. He shut out that pain with another mantra: pain is temporary. I've faced worse. He remembered a winter bivouac on the Rockies ridgeline, when frostbitten toes had left him racked with burning cold. Compared to that, this throbbing ache was trivial. His pulse steadied as he inhaled, imagining crisp alpine air replacing humid jungle marsh. He surveyed the gorge's sides. Exposed rock faces framed the falls on either flank. Vines trailed down the slick stone like sentinels. Small rivulets fed the plunge pool, pooling in shallow terraces that could serve as places to step if he dared remove his boots. The water was tempting cold relief for overheated muscles, a refreshing balm for parched skin. Marcus leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Then denial crept in. He reached for his boots' laces, preparing to sit and loosen each an act that would allow the water direct contact with his calf. But a hesitation held him back. He wrapped his fingers around the lace's thumb poised to unlatch. He remembered the venom's promise of infection, of bacteria coursing through raw punctures. Immersing the bite could ease pain, but risked aggravating tissue damage. He met that risk with brazen self-assurance. I can handle it, he muttered. With one smooth motion, he undid the laces and peeled off his right boot. His sock followed. His skin glistened with perspiration. A few droplets of water seeped into the puncture wounds, and every hair on his neck bristled. He dipped his foot into a shallow terrace. The icy flow clawed at his calf, and he closed his eyes against the sharp tension it unleashed inside him. Pain radiated down his leg, cold and raw. Yet he clenched his jaw, willing it to pass. Minutes ticked by as he sat with his leg submerged. The pain receded just enough to trick him into believing the venom's worst was gone. His breath returned to measured counts, in for 4, out for 6. He steadied his heartbeat with focused concentration. Each breath reaffirmed his mastery over body and mind. I'm fine, he told himself louder this time, as though commanding a rowdy subordinate into line. He withdrew his foot from the pool, slid on his damp sock, and laced the boot back up. The drying sock stuck uncomfortably, but he ignored its pinch. He hefted the pack and stood tall. Despite the throbbing pull in his calf, he felt invincible. He would push for another mile, before nightfall summit the opposite ridge for a view of his rescue helicopter's potential landing zones. Marcus set off uphill each step, a statement of will against his body's protests. Under the roar of the waterfall, he felt bathed in triumph. Sunlight pierced the spray in prismatic bursts, and he paused to absorb the illusion of safety. He had claimed this victory over venom. Each droplet of water glittering around him whispered tireless praise. As he climbed, however, subtle signals began to slip past his defiant guard. A dull ache settled in his thigh, spreading upward like dark smoke. His fingers felt tingly, as though pricked by tiny needles. He paused mid-stride, chest tightening. Nausea curled in his gut, weaker than earlier, but still present. Just dehydration, he rationalized, patting his hydration pack. He drank deeply, fighting the edge of dizziness. The jungle's humidity climbed as the sun wheeled westward. He could feel heat pressing against his back through his soaked shirt. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes. Yet he carried on, praising each conquered footfall. He tapped his pole firmly, setting a pace that drew sweat but kept momentum high. At the saddle's crest, he paused to catch his breath, gazing through thinning foliage at the waterfalls shimmering below. Rain clouds gathered on distant peaks, promising dusk showers. "I'll reach that ridge," he promised himself, voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear he refused to acknowledge. He pictured the slick rock faces where a helicopter's rotor wash could dislodge him. He visualized medics lowering a stretcher. His mantra faltered as the world darkened around him. A low moan escaped his lips when a wave of weakness crashed through his limbs. His chest felt heavy, as if a boulder pressed against it. He blinked, vision dancing. He shook his head vigorously. No, he was not collapsing. He gripped the trekking pole tighter, pressing it into the soil for stability. Then came the denial's final echo, "I can walk this off. I am stronger than venom. I will outrun this pain." He took another step, and the world pitched. His pole skittered away, and he collapsed against a sapling. Branches scraped his face. His breath hitched as his body slumped in protest. He tried to rise, but his legs refused. Reality tore through his denial. Mordant heat pooled behind his eyes. The sedate hum of insects turned into a cacophony, each buzz a hammer blow. The canopy above seemed to peel away, revealing an angry sun. He closed his eyes, tears tasting like salt and terror. He tried to mobilize his hands, to reach for the radio, but his arms felt leaden. The adrenaline primed him to fight, but body and venom conspired to slow his mind. A final thought flared in his fading consciousness. Pride is a dangerous thief. Then darkness swept in like a tide. Light slipped in and out of consciousness like a wavering flame as Marcus fought the encroaching void. The last coherent image before blackness was his own chest rising and falling unevenly, the jungle's shadows dancing merrily above him, taunting as if mocking his struggle. Then sensation returned in dribs and drabs, the sharp sting of insects crawling at his hairline, the distant drip of water from a leaf overhead, and the raw ache that radiated from his calf like a slow-burning fire. He awoke to the world tilted at a precarious angle, his body slumped against a mossy root. Pain blossomed instantly, throbbing unrelenting at the bite site, each heartbeat sending jagged pulses through every nerve ending. Marcus blinked eyes, adjusting to the dim, filtered light of the jungle understory. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick, as though it too had been envenomed. He shifted, testing his limbs. His left arm responded with trembling obedience, but his right leg protested with a thunderous roar of agony whenever he attempted movement. He pressed a hand to his throat, drawing a shuddering breath. Superstitious heat clung to his skin in the suffocating humidity, and his camouflaged shirt damp with sweat, and tears clung uncomfortably. The world felt too loud, every rustle of leaf and call of bird amplified in his woozy head. He forced himself to remain still. Movement, he knew, would only drive venom deeper. He had to improvise another tourniquet, one sturdier than the makeshift cord he'd applied before descending. Though groggy, Marcus's mind sharpened with purpose. He rummaged in his pack until he located the triangular bandage and a length of paracord. The bandage, a piece of lightweight nylon, was designed for versatile first aid, but now doubled as his best hope. He tugged it free and wrapped it around his thigh, just above the bite site, positioning it snugly to compress the main artery without cutting off circulation entirely. Every motion sent shockwaves of pain, but he ignored them, focusing on the task. Next, he removed the whistle from his gear, an aluminum tube he'd stowed in a small pocket, and threaded it through the bandage as a makeshift windlass. With both hands, he twisted the whistle against the fabric, tightening the bandage until the pulsation below slowed to a faint flicker. He dared not twist further. Severing blood flow entirely would risk tissue death. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tied off the ends of the bandage in a secure knot, looping a small carabiner through for quick release if needed. He placed a twig beneath the whistle to support the tension, but kept a firm grip with one hand, ready to adjust. The effort left him gasping lungs, collapsing under the weight of exertion. He sank back, staring at the rigid makeshift tourniquet, and felt a grim satisfaction. It was the best he could do. But as victory cooled in his veins, doubt seeped in. The device was rudimentary, nowhere near as precise as a medical-grade constricting band, and he was alone. If swelling increased, below the knot circulation might stagnate. If it loosened, venom would surge onward. His thoughts flickered to his grandmother's admonition: use what you have, nothing more. He exhaled, steadying his heartbeat by focusing on her voice. Each memory tempered his dread, shaping his resolve. He wiped tears and sweat from his eyes, careful not to disturb the bandage's knot. The tourniquet sat like a gauntlet against his flesh, both protection and prison. Marcus glanced at his watch. Nearly 2 hours had passed since the bite. With adrenaline's ebb, his breathing had slowed, but remained labored. His stomach churned, and his mouth tasted of copper and bile. He knew dehydration could exacerbate venom's effects. Water was vital, yet drinking too fast risked vomiting. He opted for a steady sip from his hydration bladder, nodding as the cool liquid soothed his throat. Movement, however incremental, remained essential. Sitting here allowed venom to pool in his leg. He had to ascend to a vantage point where he could signal the medevac helicopter again. Each inch he advanced would be a triumph over the jungle's merciless terrain. He pressed his hands to the ground and lifted his torso, shoulders burning with effort. His gaze dropped to his leg muscle, twitched spasmodically under the bandage, a reminder of life both threatened and fiercely clinging. Using his trekking pole as a crutch, he rose. The weight on his thigh felt unbalanced, urging him to lean left. He adjusted his pack straps once more, sliding the hip belt to redistribute his center of mass. His heart pounded audibly in his ears as he took a tentative step. The pole trembled under the strain, digging into soft earth with an uncertain scrape. He inhaled sharply and took a second step. Pain exploded again, sharp and scorching, but he forced his heel forward, planting his foot just enough to bear weight. Each budge of his leg demanded excruciating focus. The jungle's canopy overhead swayed, leaves shimmering as though cheering him on. He bowed his head, hiding tears of agony and relief. One step at a time, he rasped, channeling every ounce of willpower into his limbs. Despite the pain, he climbed. The slope rose steeply, tangled with roots slick from the earlier downpour. Moss glinted emerald on exposed rock. Marcus placed his pole at the highest stable point he could find, heaved with his arms to lift his body, and inched forward. He shifted small pebbles and dead leaves from his path, mindful not to create new hiding spots for slithering predators. Each action reaffirmed his agency against the jungle's indifferent cruelty. After painstaking minutes, he reached a fallen tree that jutted across his path. The burlap trunk lay like a natural bridge. Marcus balanced on it, hands gripping ridges of bark, and shuffled across eyes never leaving the jungle floor. Below, swirling ferns parted for small frogs that vanished at his approach. The air smelled of damp earth and the sweet rot of fallen fruits. He paused at the tree's end, feeling a swell of pride at his accomplishment. But a new obstacle loomed. A narrow gully cut the ridge at his destination, filled with muddy water and obsidian stones. Normally, he would have bypassed it, but now he had to cross it to reach the craggy outcrop that offered clear sky for a helicopter's view. Looking back, he saw only his footprints and the narrow ribbon of his struggle. Taking a deep breath, Marcus lowered himself onto the tree trunk's edge and slid down its side, landing on all fours at the gully's rim. With focused care, he forded the muddy water, each rock step chosen with precise calculation. Even a micro-slip could spell disaster. The water reached his knees, chilling him instantly. He pressed on, leaning forward to counterbalance the pole's pull and the weight of his pack. Suddenly, a sharp stab of dizziness clouded his vision. Marcus gripped the pole head, spinning. He forced himself erect, teeth gritted. Myriad voices echoed in his mind, memories from childhood camping trips when he'd learned never to quit. He took deliberate breaths to quell the swirl of nausea, then planted his pole firmly and inched across the final stones. He reached dry land and collapsed against the base of a rock face. The air here was still heavy with the scent of lichen and decaying bark. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting his ragged breath fill his lungs. The tourniquet's pressure, though necessary, burned against his skin. He flexed his fingers, experimentally relieved to find them functioning. Mobility, no matter how limited, was his lifeline. Gritting his teeth, Marcus rolled his shoulders, wrenching a cry from his chest as tension eased minutely. He tested his leg with a slight bend and found that he could bear a fraction more weight than before. Encouraged, he slid a hand into his pack pocket and pressed the radio's call button once more. "Medic team," he rasped, voice hoarse but urgent. His radio crackled to life with faint static, then the medic's voice. "Caldwell, we read you. ETA 30 minutes. Hold position." Relief flooded him. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Permission to rest even a moment filled him with gratitude. He leaned back, anchoring himself against the rock, and closed his eyes. Every sound, the drip of water, the distant call of a hornbill, felt intimate, as though the jungle celebrated his survival. The makeshift tourniquet held his instruments of rescue functioning. He had turned improvisation into salvation as sweat cooled on his skin and pain throbbed in rhythmic pulses. Marcus marked time with measured breaths, waiting for the rotor's distant thrum. In the jungle's embrace, he had claimed victory enough to know that the fight was not over, but defeat was no longer an option. The humid air pressed against Marcus's skin as he settled against the rock face, rationing his breaths like precious currency. Beads of sweat, cooled by the jungle's breeze, trickled down his temple. He kept his eyes closed, conserving energy, but even rest offered no true respite. The tourniquet's grip pulsed with every heartbeat, a grim reminder of the venom's relentless advance. He knew he had only bought himself time. Without prompt anti-venom, tissue damage would worsen, and systemic effects could prove fatal. Despite victory's taste in his veins, Marcus felt the first stirrings of fear. His limbs twitched not with pain, but with raw apprehension. Every muscle in his body trembled at the thought of waiting alone, vulnerable until help arrived. Yet he dared not let panic take root. He inhaled deeply, focusing on the forest's ambient hum, the droning cicadas, the distant waterfall's cadence, the whisper of leaves stirred by unseen creatures. In those sounds, he found a fragile serenity. Checking his wristwatch, Marcus noted 20 minutes remained until the medic team's projected arrival. He removed the rubber seal from a small foil packet in his pack and poured powdered electrolyte mix into his canteen. The fizz of the solution echoed in the hollow canyon, and he pressed the spout to his lips, sipping slowly. Hydration steadied his pulse and eased the dry scratch in his throat, a minor relief in the face of lingering dread. His gaze drifted over the rock-strewn clearing in front of him, where beams of sunlight filtered through shifting leaves, landing in dapples around the gully. Tiny insects swarmed around decaying logs, and he watched as a scarlet millipede curled into a spiral armor, plating shifting like living sculpture. The millipede's resilience, its capacity to coil and protect itself, struck a chord. He smiled faintly, drawing strength from the creature's simple defense. As the minutes ticked by, Marcus's thoughts drifted inward. Sharp pangs of nausea gnawed at his gut, compelling him to sit up. He leaned forward, pressing his hands against his knees, willing his stomach to settle. A rush of vertigo bowed his vision, but he fought it down with shallow breaths. He reached into a mesh pocket on his pack and retrieved a small cellulose tablet of activated charcoal, another measure against whatever toxins ran through his bloodstream. He placed the tablet on his tongue and washed it down with a deliberate swallow, the dry texture catching at his throat. With his stomach steadied, he reclined again, closing his eyes. Each sound vibrated through his bones. His ears caught a faint rustle at the gully's edge, leaves brushing against a branch. Marcus sat up a fraction, head tilting toward the sound. A red-backed tree frog hopped into view, its glossy skin reflecting patches of light like emeralds. It paused, eyes wide, then leapt away into shadows. In that brief encounter, he felt kinship. Both of them perched on the edge of danger, awaiting rescue. The forest seemed to exhale as the day deepened. Shadows lengthened and a cooler breeze stirred. Marcus shivered, wrapping his free arm around his torso to preserve warmth. Though heat had tormented him earlier, this sudden chill carried its own threat. If his body's core temperature dropped too low, blood flow through his tourniqueted leg could further slow. He fished out his emergency thermal blanket, unraveling it to cover his shoulders and chest. The crinkling nylon clung uncomfortably to his skin, but its reflective surface captured slivers of light, sending shards dancing across the rock. He paused, envisioning the rescue team's helicopter slicing through the canopy's roof. He recalled their training videos, the thump of rotors, the sudden gust of wind kicking up dust and leaves, the downdraft pressing against skin until the world seemed to reel. Marcus steadied himself, practicing the posture he would need, leaning forward, bracing one foot in the gully, one on the rock's edge, to avoid slipping as medics lowered the stretcher. In his mind, he walked through each step, preempting every contingency. A sudden trill of excitement tickled his radio. "Caldwell, this is Medic 1. We're within 10 minutes. Prepare for extraction." Relief coursed through him, stronger than any analgesic. He clicked his tongue in thanks voice, croaked but clear. "Copy that. Standing by." He cradled the radio against his chest as though it were a talisman, warding off the final extents of venom's spread. He removed the tourniquet's windlass twig and threaded his hand beneath the bandage, slowly loosening the knot until a faint pulse returned, one he didn't dare measure too closely yet. The tension eased, though an ache filled the space like residual static after a thunderstorm. He retied the bandage slightly lower, mindful not to undo his work, then patted it in soothing circles. Movement remained a calculated risk. One wrong shift and veins might flood with venom. So Marcus reviewed every instruction he'd learned. Stay calm, remain partially immobilized, keep hydration and nutrition steady, prepare landing zone. He sipped more electrolyte solution. Despite his care, nausea returned. He pinched his nose shut and blew forcing air through his sinuses to settle the queasiness. As sunlight waned, the jungle's colors deepened greens, turning to rich teal shadows, slipping toward indigo. Marcus felt drowsiness tug at his eyelids. Though rest would conserve energy, sleeping in his current state was dangerous. Unconsciousness could prevent timely self-adjustment of the tourniquet. He forced himself to stay upright, draining the last of his electrolyte mix, then stowed the empty packet. In the diminishing light, his pack's reflective strips caught a final golden flash. He fingered one, recalling the promise printed beneath. In extreme situations, a single spark can light the way. Though abstract, the motto echoed literally as dusk blurred the forest's edge. He tapped his trekking pole against the rock, each echo a heartbeat. "Hold on," he whispered, addressing both himself and the jungle around him. Then a distant thrum rolled through the evening air, a low, steady pulse that rattled chest bones and set the ferns quivering. Marcus glanced up, hope alighting in his chest. The sound grew, becoming the deep hum of rotors slicing through canopy. Warm wind gusted past him, rough and urgent. He rose with care, securing his tourniquet strap and clicking his radio. "I see you landing, zone secured." His voice cracked under relief, but rang with triumph. Leaves swirled overhead as the helicopter descended, spotlights playing across tree trunks. Medics swooped in their boots, crunching on undergrowth. Within moments, a team member knelt beside him, assessing his leg with professional calm. Marcus offered a weak nod, gratitude shining in his eyes. As they prepared the stretcher, the charged atmosphere of rescue enveloped him. Voices calm, hands sure, equipment efficient. Pain receded into background noise, overtaken by exhilaration. Though terror had stalked him for hours now, human connection and expertise held sway. He closed his eyes as they lifted him gently, bracing for the ride toward safety. In that moment, suspended between hurt and hope, Marcus allowed himself a brief surrender. The jungle's looming threat receded, replaced by human compassion. The rotor's pulse became his own as he exhaled, certain that soon, with anti-venom flowing and skilled hands at his side, he would see the world anew. Marcus drifted between awareness and haze as the helicopter's rotors hummed overhead, each beat reverberating through his chest like a promise. When the ground stabilized beneath him, the medevac team had him gently clasped in the stretcher, heartbeat monitored IV line threaded into his arm. The jungle's oppressive chorus faded as they lifted him aboard, replacing insect drone with the clinical pulse of monitors. Despite the sterile surroundings, his mind journeyed inward, tethered by pain, yet buoyed by relief. He conjured the face of his mother, her warm brown eyes brimming with concern when he'd told her about this expedition. She'd kissed his forehead and whispered old family blessings, her hands soft as silk against his cheek, and Marcus realized in that moment how tethered he was to those roots. He remembered the scent of her cooking tangy tomato stew laced with cilantro, her laughter echoing against kitchen walls, the way her voice sounded when she prayed for his safe return each night. Next, his father's rugged silhouette emerged through the haze. He recalled teaching a younger Marcus to straddle a creek on a fallen log, urging him to keep his gaze forward, never down. "Trust your instincts," his father had said, voice gravelly, with the memory of logging work. Marcus felt the strength of those words, now realizing how they'd instilled a warrior's calm in him. A tiny smile curved his lips as he envisioned his dad's thumbs up, his simple way of marking pride. In another corner of his mind, the memory of his grandmother flickered, a gentle matriarch with stories like raindrops of wisdom. She'd sat by him years ago, weaving baskets from reeds, teaching him patience with each deliberate coil. "Life rewards those who weave carefully," she'd advised, her voice soft but firm. Marcus reflected on how her lessons on patience and precision guided his snakebite tourniquet improvisation, an echo of her wisdom manifest in the jungle. Even as monitors beeped steadily beside him, he drifted further into the past. He saw the first time he camped under the stars, a childhood sleepover with friends on a grassy hilltop. The thrill of night sounds, the wide expanse of sky above, and the crackle of campfire embers formed the blueprint of his adventurer's soul. A part of him longed for that carefree wonder before danger etched itself into memory. A flash of his fiancée's laugh warmed him next. He pictured her perched on a chalet balcony in the Alps, wind whipping at her hair as she slapped his arm playfully at his overzealous reenactment of a mountaineer's yodel. Her love had grounded him, given him perspective beyond the next summit or expedition. He felt a tug at his heart mingled with longing and sweetness, promising himself that this ordeal would bind him closer to her rather than isolate him. Amid these bright recollections, darker moments surfaced too: failures and self-doubt. He thought of the time he nearly drowned in a rushing river during a whitewater trek panic, turning limbs to lead until a guide's strong arm hauled him out. He'd resented his hesitation, then chastising himself for letting fear steal control. Now, in the sterile hum of the helicopter's cabin, he acknowledged how that near miss had taught him to manage panic and focus under duress. Finally, the specter of the jungle itself called to his memory the way sunlight danced through the canopy at dawn, the mossy scent of decay and renewal, the paradox of beauty and brutality intertwined beneath every leaf. He felt awe for the living tapestry that had sought both to enchant and to harm him. As the chopper banked toward the plateau's rim, he pictured the jade-green lagoon's still surface, forever shifted in his inner vision. Marcus's chest swelled with a mixture of gratitude and humility. Each memory was a thread woven into his identity, reinforcing that his survival depended not only on gear and training, but on love, wisdom, and resilience passed down through generations. The realization bolstered him. Fear receded like a low tide, leaving his core spirit exposed but unbroken. He shifted slightly on the stretcher where the medic administered a low-dose sedative to ease his pain spikes. His eyelids fluttered, mind waiting back toward hypnotic calm. Yet before sleep claimed him, Marcus vowed to record every detail in his journal: his mother's prayers, his father's advice, his grandmother's wisdom, the alpine laughter of his fiancée, so that when he recovered, he could honor each memory in ink and story. A final beam of sunlight pierced the cabin's small window as the helicopter cleared the jungle's edge. Marcus exhaled, eyes closing, for the momentary rest permitted by sedation. In that half-shadowed space between consciousness and dreams, he felt cradled by memories that were both anchor and sail, propelling him toward healing and rebirth. Dawn light filtered through the hospital's narrow window blinds, casting striped patterns across Marcus's face. A sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with the soft hum of ventilators and distant footsteps in the corridor. Though he lay on a cushioned gurney, now cushioned by skilled hands, his mind still dwelt in the vast expanse of the Plateau jungle where thirst and isolation had carved their lessons. He lay still for a moment, tasting dry cotton in his mouth as he recalled the desperate hours spent scavenging for water. In that green labyrinth, every drop had felt like liquid gold. There had been the jade-green lagoon tempting yet unreachable until after the snakebite strike. Earlier, before panic gripped him, he had knelt by that mirrored pool, cupping hands to his lips, despite knowing toxic algae sometimes bloomed in sun-warmed basins. He remembered the sweet shock of relief as the cool liquid soothed his parch, a fleeting comfort swallowed by the urgency of his situation. Back in the present, a nurse adjusted his IV line, its drip delivering fluids to replenish the water he had lost to sweat and terror. Marcus's throat constricted as he nodded in gratitude. He could feel warmth radiating from the saline solution as it entered his veins, easing muscle cramps and banishing the roughness from his voice. The thought of fresh water, pure, safe, and abundant, stirred something deeper, an awareness of what true isolation meant. In the jungle, he had been surrounded by life, towering figs, squadrons of insects, and hidden predators, yet utterly alone. Each step forward demanded self-reliance. Without radio contact, he had carried the weight of life or death on his own shoulders. He recalled the moment when his radio crackled back to life, the brief, miraculous communion with unseen rescuers that shattered his solitude. Even then, he had felt separated by miles of terrain and hours of agony, connected but still alone in his struggle. A gentle breeze drifted through the cracked window pane, carrying hints of early spring blossoms from outside. Marcus closed his eyes, leaning into the memory of the plateau's humid air and tangled undergrowth. He remembered the swampy marsh where the ground had felt like shifting quicksand under his boots, forcing him to unbuckle and wade ankle-deep through murky pools. The taste of brackish water had lingered on his tongue when he lapped from a broken water bottle he'd discovered half buried beneath reeds. It had burned his throat with mineral tang, but had been too precious to spare. Now the IV bag's measured drip reminded him that hydration was no longer a gamble, but a guarantee. Yet isolation lingered in a different form. Hospital walls replaced tree trunks, and beeping monitors echoed where cicadas once droned. His only view was the narrow corridor glimpsed through slats of blinds, not the endless green canopy. A pang of longing twisted in his chest. He yearned for the jungle's symphony, the whisper of leaves, the distant roar of water, the hiss of unseen snakes. Every sound, a reminder he was alive. Marcus shifted, wincing, as the IV needle pulled slightly. He swallowed, voice thick. "How long until I can drink on my own?" The nurse offered a reassuring smile. "Another day or two, Mr. Caldwell. Your body needs time to rebalance after losing so much fluid. But soon we'll transition you to clear liquids." He nodded, eyes drifting back to the blind's stripes. 2 days felt like an eternity, yet safer than a moment in that jungle alone. He let out a slow breath, releasing a tension he hadn't known he held. The contrast between the plateau's relentless thirst and the hospital's excess pressed in on him, stirring gratitude for this sterile confinement. His thoughts wandered to the little stash of water purification tablets. He'd carried enough for a small stream, but not for the months one might need in a true wilderness emergency. He had prized each tablet like currency, rationing them when his own supplies ran low. Here, the hospital offered chemical purification on a scale he'd never imagined, safe water at the twist of a tap. Yet isolation's lesson extended beyond physical need. In those hours of parched desperation, he had confronted his inner voids, fear, regret, and the specter of failure. Nights listening to the calls of nocturnal creatures had amplified his loneliness. He'd whispered pleas for rescue to the moonlit sky, pacing until exhaustion seized him. The jungle had tested his spirit, revealing the limits of solitude, even as it kindled fierce self-reliance. Now surrounded by white walls and the reassuring hum of human care, he felt both relieved and restless. He longed for the jungle's unpredictable embrace, where every sense had been attuned to survival. Here his senses were dulled by anesthesia of routine, vital checks, routine doses of medication, routine murmured conversations outside his door. He missed the pulse of danger, the clarity of purpose found only when life hangs by a thread. His nurse refilled his water pitcher, its lid clicking softly. Marcus watched her walk away, floor tiles clicking beneath her shoes. The corridor beyond glinted antiseptically. He raised his hand and drank slowly, the cold water soothing parched lips and drifting warmth down his throat. Each swallow was a reminder he had crossed a threshold from desperate solitude into collective care. He closed his eyes again and visualized the plateau's ridges, the jade lagoon, the craggy landing zone, all landmarks in his journey from desperation to salvation. Though his body lay still, his mind roamed that green cathedral. He focused on the memory of finding that first trickle of water in the marsh, how he had crouched, cupped it between hardened palms, and let it dribble onto his tongue. Thankful, terrified, alive. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. His doctor entered, chart in hand, offering words of progress, improving kidney function, stabilized electrolytes, promising recovery. Marcus listened, nodding, eyes bright with gratitude. The doctor's reassurance felt like a bridge back to normalcy, a path out of isolation built on medical expertise and human compassion. As the doctor spoke, Marcus realized that thirst and isolation, once his greatest foes, had become teachers. They had stripped him to essentials, water, shelter, self-trust, and shown him both his fragility and his core resilience. In the jungle, he had faced dehydration's edge and solitude's abyss, emerging with hard-won insight. No one truly survives alone. Even in isolation, hope thrives when one dares to reach out, whether via crackling radio or by trusting strangers to guide him back to safety. When the doctor departed, Marcus lay back afore, humming gently beside him, and allowed the steady rhythm of hospital life to wash over him. He no longer feared thirst nor dreaded isolation. Instead, he honored them as crucibles forging his will. Outside the blinds, sunlight shifted stripes, dancing across the wall like jungle patterns. In that moment, he felt connected to every creature he'd encountered. Frog, millipede, bird, each had whispered the same truth. Water sustains, community saves, and even the deepest solitude can yield the strength to endure. Marcus woke to the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant murmur of nurses on their evening rounds. His eyelids fluttered heavy as lead, each blink a laborious task. He shifted in the hospital bed, drawing careful breaths to gauge his strength. The IV bag beside him dripped steadily, replacing fluids lost to sweat, blood, and venom's insidious assault. Though far from the Plateau jungle's relentless heat, Marcus felt every muscle protest the simplest movement. He sat up on one elbow torso, weighing down his limbs like anchored driftwood. His calf throbbed in concert with his heartbeat, a dull hammer echoing the memory of the snake's fangs. He let his feet dangle over the bed's edge, testing the waters of mobility. Even this tentative shift summoned waves of fatigue. Each breath tightened his chest, and his vision blurred at the edges. Side effects of the anti-venom infusion started earlier that day. He groaned softly, an involuntary sound of frustration. Marcus had always prided himself on physical endurance, on pushing through exhaustion. Yet now, routine procedures, rolling to sit, swinging legs over the bed, felt like climbing a mountain in full gear. His limbs carried residual spasms, muscle fibers stiff from days of immobility and the venom's tissue breakdown. He closed his eyes and inhaled slowly, recalling the crucial mantra he'd used in the jungle: one breath, one movement. He focused on his next action, sitting fully upright. He pressed both hands against the mattress, pushing his weight upward. The muscles in his arms shook under the strain, but he won. His torso straightened. He planted his feet on the cool linoleum floor, ankles creaking in protest. He tested the weight of his legs. The left held firm, but the right quivered under pressure, as though filled with lead. "Take it slow," the memory of his father's voice whispered. Marcus steadied himself by gripping the bed rail. He rose to a standing position, legs bent to absorb the surge of lightheadedness that brushed at his mind. He willed none of it to derail him. He planted the toes of his right foot, then the ball inch by inch, shifting his weight forward. Each fragment of movement felt monumental, the world tilting with every millimeter of travel. At the bedside table lay a set of parallel bars and a folded walker, a testament to how far from self-sufficiency he'd fallen. He reached for the walker, arms trembling as he unfolded it. The metal clinked a strange symphony of progress. He positioned it in front of him and gripped its padded handles, allowing his weight to rest on the frame. The familiar feel of grip under his palms offered unexpected comfort. Marcus took a cautious step, shifting weight onto the walker and extending his right leg. Pain flared in his calf, a sharp reminder that the snake's venom remained embedded in his tissue, and the anti-venom's battle within his bloodstream continued. He inhaled, pushing through the sting, and moved the walker forward again. One step, then another. He recited the mantra aloud. One breath, one movement. The corridor beyond his room stretched into dim light, a path toward the rehabilitation gym where physical therapists awaited. Every inch felt like a trial of will. The nurse on duty spotted him and hurried over. "Easy," she encouraged, her voice calm. "Let's go slowly." She steadied his gait, slipping an arm around his waist. Marcus nodded, grateful for the support, yet determined that this portion of recovery would be his alone. They reached the hallway mirror, and Marcus glanced at his reflection. His face was pale eyes rimmed with fatigue, yet a spark of pride gleamed within. He straightened his shoulders, chin lifted. Each unsteady step marked progress, a tangible proof He was not defined by helplessness. The jungle had stripped him to bare bones of survival. Now he rebuilt himself brick by brick through these small victories. The therapist led him to a padded bench and instructed him to sit. Marcus complied the effort, evident in every motion. They began a series of leg exercises, ankle pumps, gentle knee extensions, hamstring stretches, each movement prescribed to restore strength and flexibility. Pain accompanied each repetition, a reminder of the poison's lingering toll. Yet when he completed 10 sets, his therapist offered a bright smile. "Good job, Marcus. That's excellent." The affirmation filled him with warmth. He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. His shirt clung damply to his back, but he felt invigorated, as though each drop of perspiration was a badge of honor. He allowed himself a moment of reprieve, breathing deeply, absorbing the sensation of muscle fibers reawakening. The simple act of moving without life or death stakes felt almost luxurious. After exercises, the therapist guided him back to his room, encouraging consistent hydration and rest. Marcus lay back on the crisp sheets, muscles already aching from exertion. He closed his eyes and drifted into semi-consciousness, the bed's surface cradling his battered body. Even in rest, he replayed steps from the jungle retreat, meticulous foot placement across jagged rocks, conscious breathing to quell nausea. The echoes of survival tactics meshed seamlessly with rehabilitation instructions. Night fell and the ward quieted. Marcus lay awake, listening to the faint beeping of monitors and the echoing footsteps in the hallway. His mind plotted tomorrow's regimen, envisioning stronger strides, more confidence. Growth from vulnerability, he reflected, just like the Plateau's orchids blooming from shattered limestone crevices. Despite the hospital's sterile walls, he felt alive. Each movement, however small, signified reclaiming autonomy. His body's frailty no longer frightened him. Instead, it humbled him, reinforcing gratitude for each functional limb. Soon he would walk without aid, perhaps even run. For now, he closed his eyes, settling into rest, hopeful for the strength the next dawn would bring. Night settled over the hospital wing like a velvet blanket. The fluorescent lights dimmed to a soft glow that allowed nurses to tend without harsh glare. Marcus lay in his bed, propped by pillows, legs covered in immaculate bandages. The antiseptic scent lingered, mingling with the muted hum of equipment. Despite the calm, his mind refused to rest. Memories of the Plateau jungle's darkness pressed close, vivid as flickering firelight. He recalled the suffocating blackness beneath the canopy at night, the absence of stars blocked by leaves so dense they swallowed moonbeams whole. After the bite, when shadows deepened and nocturnal creatures claimed their dominion, fear had tightened around him like a vice. The forest's chorus crickets, cicadas, distant howls had become an ominous soundtrack. Marcus felt that same tension now as he lay alone in the half-lit room, the night shift's slow footsteps echoing outside his door. A soft click announced the entrance of the night nurse, clipboard in hand, face gentle behind a surgical mask. She checked his vital signs, noting the steady rhythm of his heartbeat on the monitor. Marcus offered a tired smile. "Thank you," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "Can I get some water before sleep?" "Of course," she replied, lowering the bed's side rail. Her hand brushed his forearm as she handed him a cup. "Drink slowly, okay, and try to rest." He nodded. The cold water slipped down his throat, soothing a scratch that had returned with the evening's dryness. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the sensation. Outside the hallway, lights pulsed faintly, painting patterns through his half-open door. Marcus's thoughts drifted back to the jungle's night. He saw the dim glow of bioluminescent fungi on fallen logs, their ghostly light guiding his path when daylight had failed. He remembered how he'd chosen high ground to avoid waterlogged trails that became treacherous slicks after dusk. In those hours, each rustle of leaf or snap of twig had signaled potential danger. Big cats, insects, and snakes emboldened by cooler temperatures. Here inside safe walls, he felt the irony he craved, the raw clarity that darkness had forced in the wild. At home, he sometimes lay awake at night worrying. In the jungle, worry had no choice but to sharpen instincts. Mortality had seemed more immediate there, but purpose had burned brighter. Now purpose felt diluted by routine, threatened by the silence that encouraged second-guessing. He emptied the cup and set it on the bedside table. The nurse straightened his blanket and dimmed the lamp. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." Her footsteps receded. Left alone, Marcus stared up at the ceiling, tracing patterns in the pale grid. He drew comfort from the regularity, every panel identical, every line controlled, unlike the unpredictable tangle of lianas and roots. Yet his heart pulsed to the rhythm of chaos he'd lived through. He missed that raw, unscripted tempo. A distant drip from the IV stand punctuated the hush. Marcus rolled onto his side, shielding the bandaged leg. The padding felt heavy, like a cocoon, trapping him between convalescence and the wild. He inhaled, recalling how he'd once cupped rainwater in large leaves, sheltering it until the sun evaporated droplets into morning mist. That ritual had taught him patience. Now patience was his only path forward. He closed his eyes, summoning the forest's night soundtrack in his mind. Cicadas thrummed in patterns, frogs croaked in harmony, and the distant roar of the waterfall provided a metronome for his heartbeat. He imagined lying beside that pool, its waters reflecting a canopy alive with unseen movements. There, under starlight, he had faced fear and triumphed. A soft chirp from the monitor startled him, and he sat up, glancing at the screen. The nurse's metric cursor flickered over his oxygen saturation stable within normal range. He exhaled relief washing through him. Even in the sterile night's embrace, life buzzed in mechanical precision. Marcus lowered himself onto the pillow. The hospital's darkness felt nothing like the jungle's here. Shadows receded under faint light. Their darkness had hidden threats at every turn. Yet, as he drifted toward sleep, he felt gratitude for both. One taught vigilance and awe. The other offered safety and healing. He steadied his breath, 4 counts in 6 out. His eyelids grew heavy. For a moment, he balanced on the edge between wakefulness and dreams. In that liminal space, he saw the phantom of the plateau's ridgeline against the faint shimmer of dawn light. He heard once more the hiss of that viper as it slid away, a warning, a reminder of life's fragility and resilience. As sleep finally claimed him, Marcus welcomed the darkness here, gentle and restorative. Tomorrow he would face another sunrise of recovery. But tonight he let the hospital night lantern guide him, secure in the knowledge that even in darkness, light persists. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in gentle slats of light, drawing Marcus from sleep with a sense of quiet purpose. Unlike the blur of his first hospital dawn, today he woke with intention. Each breath felt like a conscious choice to rise, to move, to reclaim his strength. The antivenom had done its work, and the swelling in his calf had receded, replaced by a firm soreness that spoke of recovery rather than ongoing injury. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, testing the weight. A flicker of steel ignited in his chest, a determination that had taken root deep within, nurtured by every challenge he'd faced in the jungle. His memories of creeping paralysis and bone-deep fear no longer held him captive. Instead, they fueled his resolve to rebuild. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling both the ache and the promise in his muscles. Nurses bustled past, murmuring greetings. He returned their hellos with a firm nod, savoring the normalcy of human exchange. Not long ago, every greeting would have felt hollow compared to the raw, silent dialogue he'd maintained with the jungle, listening for rustles, interpreting shadows, coaxing water from parched earth. Now his interactions were warm and vocal, a reminder that resilience often blossoms in community. After a hearty breakfast of oatmeal and fruit, Marcus prepared for his morning therapy session. He donned lightweight shorts that exposed his healing leg, its skin still faintly mottled where venom had pooled. The therapy room lay just down the hallway, a bright space lined with windows overlooking a courtyard garden. Through the glass, a single tree stood in full bloom, its petals drifting like pale snow. He paused before entering, inhaled deeply, and let that simple beauty steel his resolve. His physical therapist, Anna, greeted him with a smile that radiated encouragement. "Ready for today's session?" she asked, adjusting her clipboard. Marcus nodded, flexing his ankle experimentally. A small win, he could feel tension in his calf without pain's sharp jolt. "Let's build on yesterday," Anna said, guiding him to the parallel bars. Today's exercises focused on balance and controlled weight transfer. Marcus placed his hands on the bar's feet, planted squarely on the floor. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on a decal of ocean waves on the far wall. Each shift of weight came with a mental mantra: steady, strong, forward. He lifted his right foot an inch, held the position for a count of 3, then set it down. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, yet monumental, a declaration that he would not be defined by what sought to immobilize him. After several repetitions, Anna introduced a foam pad under his right foot to challenge proprioception. Marcus took a breath, set his weight, and stepped onto the yielding surface. His leg wavered, but he held firm. With each tiny correction ankle, twisting quadriceps engaging, he found stability. When he completed the set, Anna encouraged him to stand tall. His chest swelled with pride. He realized then that resilience wasn't just a trait, but an action, the decision to stand again every time adversity threatened to topple him. Next came gait training in the corridor. Marcus gripped his walker and Anna released its brakes. He stepped forward, heel to toe, focusing on a point beyond the windows. Morning light warmed his skin as he advanced in measured strides. Each step reminded him of the plateau's sun-drenched slopes where every descent required deliberate placement. Here, though the stakes were lower, the triumph felt equally profound. When the session ended, Marcus thanked Anna sincerely. He returned to his room feeling energized, the ache in his leg now a welcome companion of progress. He caught sight of his reflection in the corridor window, a figure upright, alert eyes bright. He nodded at himself. "Keep going," he whispered. His next task lay in the courtyard. The hospital had arranged a mindfulness walk program, leveraging the healing power of nature. Marcus joined a small group of patients, each with their own journey of recovery, and stepped onto a winding stone path flanked by flower beds. The contrast between the human-tended garden and the untamed jungle he'd traversed struck him. Yet both shared the same essence, life persisting against obstacles. He walked slowly, focusing on textures, the smooth stones underfoot, the soft petals brushing his fingertips, the rustle of leaves overhead. With each inhale, he breathed in resilience. With each exhale, he released the last traces of victimhood. Ahead, the path curved toward a bench overlooking the garden fountain. He sat, legs extended, feeling sunlight dance across healing skin. His mind drifted to the pivotal moment in the saddle when Venom's spread nearly claimed him. He remembered the crushing realization that his body might fail him. In that hour of fading strength, he had summoned memories of home, of loved ones to kindle his will. Today, sitting among blossoming flowers and the murmur of water, he honored that memory. Resilience was both his heritage and his legacy, passed down from his grandmother's patience, from his father's steadfastness, from his mother's unwavering faith. After a moment of reflection, Marcus rose and returned indoors. He paused by the nurse's station to jot a note of thanks for their care, leaving a small token, a polished stone from the plateau that he'd carried in his pocket since the expedition's start. "For the team who saved my life," he wrote. The stone's surfaces bore the faint scratches of the jungle's terrain, proof of his battle and resolve. Back in his room, Marcus opened his journal for the first time since admission. He had filled its early pages with botanical sketches and wildlife observations. Now, blank pages awaited a new chapter, one of recovery, gratitude, and resilience. He wrote the date at the top, then began, "Today I stand again, not because danger has vanished, but because I chose to rise." As afternoon light warmed the room, Marcus closed the journal with satisfaction. His narrative, once fraught with peril, now shifted toward renewal. The path ahead remained long, but each step forward reinforced a truth he would carry always. Resilience is forged in adversity and carried into each future dawn. He set the journal on his bedside table, lay back against the pillows, and allowed himself a moment's rest. Outside, petals drifted past the window, carried by a gentle breeze. Marcus smiled, heart anchored by newfound strength, ready for whatever tomorrow's challenges would bring. Marcus felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under sterile hospital sheets, the soft whoosh of ventilators, and the distant murmur of a nursing station forming a gentle cocoon around him. Yet beneath the veneer of recovery, his mind drifted back to the Plateau jungle, to a moment of raw vulnerability that he had not fully acknowledged until now. The moment when an unexpected ally appeared out of the green depths and saved him from a fate far darker than the serpent's bite. He closed his eyes and summoned the humid air, the scent of ferns and damp earth, and the distant roar of the waterfall where he'd collapsed overwhelmed by Venom's heat. He remembered how for what felt like an eternity, he had lain motionless, assuming rescue would come from the sky or radio waves, but neither arrived. The jungle's canopy had swallowed his shouts, its vastness offering no reply. He had consented to cold panic, his body a tangle of muscle cramps and fevered delirium. Then through the haze of pain and hallucination, he had smelled smoke, not the acrid tang of lightning-split trees, but the milder woodsy aroma of a fire kept small, controlled. He opened his eyes to see a figure kneeling by the waterfall's brink, striking flint against steel to spark a tiny flame. The man's skin was the rich umber of river clay, his hair a dark coil crowned with a band of woven grass. He wore simple cloth dyed with bark tannins, and across his back slung a bundle of medicinal plants and a slender blowpipe. Marcus watched too weak to speak as this stranger, neither local guide nor military medic, approached, moving with sure-footed grace over slippery stones. The tribesman knelt beside him and assessed the injury with keen, unhurried eyes. Not the hurried scan of a paramedic, but the studied appraisal of someone who had seen death dance through these woods countless times. He dipped a hand in the pool, then pressed cool water to the puncture wounds, murmuring words in a tonal language Marcus could not decipher, yet felt resonate like a healing chant. The tribesman produced a length of braided vine and deftly twisted it into a secure tourniquet above the bite, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon guided by ancient knowledge. Then he opened his bundle, sorting through leaves of bitter sap and roots that shimmered with resin. He crushed them between stones, mixing the green pulp into a paste and applied it to the punctures, securing it with broad strips of inner bark. The mixture stung like fire, and Marcus gasped, but the pain that followed was the pain of hope, a promise that the forest itself could be both judge and healer. With careful hands, the tribesman lifted Marcus's pack across his back and, supporting Marcus under the shoulders, maneuvered him into a fire-scorched saddle tree hollow. There he balanced the stretcher he fashioned from sapling poles and woven liana fibers. Marcus lay on it like a wounded animal, but the tribesman's calm presence erased shame. He whispered again in his tongue, then laid a palm over Marcus's heart, a silent vow to protect him, and motioned for him to hold tight. Marcus felt himself borne across the uneven ground, each footfall deliberate, the tribesman's muscles rippling beneath damp cloth. Overhead, vines dripped dew, and insects skittered across leaves as if whispering warnings to step lightly. Yet the tribesman made no unnecessary sounds. His respect for the jungle's spirits was palpable. He carried Marcus past the orchid-covered outcrops and the jade lagoon's mist-shrouded banks, up rugged ridges where the air thinned and the sky opened, until he reached a narrow path that led to a gathering of simple huts perched at the plateau's edge. There, in the villager's medicine hut, a structure of woven bamboo and thatch, Marcus was laid on a raised bed of woven reeds. The tribesman called softly to an elder, a weathered woman whose hands moved with practiced certainty, gathering more herbs and directing a young assistant to fetch fresh water from a hidden spring. The elder assessed Marcus's wounds, then nodded with approval at the tribesman's first aid. She murmured blessings and placed a wound cleaning cloth steeped in antiseptic bark brew over his calves, while the tribesman brewed a bitter tea of crushed berries and root shavings, instructing Marcus to sip it to steady his fevered mind. Though delirium nudged him toward unconsciousness, Marcus remembered leaning his head back, tasting the medicine's earthy bitterness, and feeling a flicker of gratitude ignite in his chest. He tried to whisper thanks, but words tangled on his tongue. Instead, he squeezed the tribesman's arm, feeling sinew and warmth beneath cloth, and watched as the tribesman offered a rare smile, soft knowing, as though he understood pain and gratitude as one. The next hours blurred hours of sweat and fever dreams. Marcus sensed the tribesman by his side, chopping fresh herbs, chanting soft invocations to forest spirits, tending the fire to ward off night's chill. When dawn's first light filtered through the bamboo slats, the tribesman was gone, having slipped into the forest to scout a path for professional rescuers. Marcus woke to find the makeshift door ajar and a hand-drawn map tucked beside his bed, a winding line through familiar landmarks leading back toward the plateau's footpath and the faint echo of human settlement. He rose with difficulty, guided by the map and his resolve, and staggered toward rescue. The village's women and elders chanted blessings as he passed. 4 hours later, he heard the droning rotors of the medevac helicopter discovering him on a clearing just beyond the huts. Medics airlifted him, but Marcus knew it was the tribesman's courage and skill that had truly pulled him back from death's edge. Back in the hospital, Marcus opened his eyes from that memory with a start, as though he'd just woken from a trance. He felt a profound indebtedness ripple through him. The alliance of strangers, first the tribesman, then the elder, then the medevac team, had woven a lifeline when he'd faced the jungle's indifferent cruelty alone. The image of the tribesman's steady hands, the pale glow of the medicine hut's embers, burned bright in his mind. Marcus sat up, a newfound urgency propelling him. He reached for the small leather pouch at his bedside, the one implanted with gifts from friends and family, and retrieved the smooth, dark stone the tribesman had left alongside the map. He studied its polished surface, feeling the weight of that man's selfless act. He vowed silently to honor the tribesman's memory, to acknowledge that true resilience isn't forged in solitude, but in community, even when that community emerges unexpectedly from the heart of the wild. He touched the stone to his lips and whispered a vow. "Thank you for lighting my way." Then he placed it back gently and lay back, chest swelling with gratitude and humility. Dawn's first light crept through the huts, painting the bamboo walls in pale gold as Marcus squared his shoulders and rose with effort. The tribesman, his silent guardian through the night, stood waiting, familiar map unfurled between his weathered fingers. Marcus slung his pack over one shoulder, the weight now tempered by herbal salves and renewed hope. Each breath carried the forest's floral musk, a fleeting luxury before the grueling journey ahead. They set out along a narrow footpath that skirted the lagoon's mist-shrouded fringe. Dew-laden ferns brushed Marcus's calves, and his boots sank slightly into soft mud. The tribesmen moved ahead barefoot, yet sure-footed, stepping over roots and rocks without hesitation. Marcus trailed close each stride, a conscious negotiation with his healing leg strength and pain interwoven like braided vines. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in shifting patterns, guiding them westward. The tribesman paused at a fork marked by stacked stones, a subtle road sign in this vast wilderness. He tapped the larger stack, then pointed toward a ridge where smoke curled from a distant cleft. That cleft, the map suggested, led to a rough trail used by forest rangers and local hunters. Beyond lay the plateau's edge, and below the valley, where the nearest medical outpost stood. Marcus nodded, certitude swelling in his chest. He matched the tribesman's pace muscles tightening, then loosening with each step. The forest hummed around them, cicadas thrumming birds, calling insects skittering through leaf litter. Unlike his solo trek, he no longer felt isolated. Each rustle and chirp was a shared chorus with his companion. As they climbed, the path narrowed and steepened. Loose stones skittered beneath Marcus's boots, threatening to betray his balance. The tribesman paused, stooped to scoop a handful of gravel, and scattered it evenly across a slip zone. He gestured for Marcus to test the footing before advancing. With cautious determination, Marcus placed his foot on the stabilized ground, flexed his ankle, and inched forward. Each successful step felt like a small victory, a testament to cooperation over solitude. Higher and higher, they climbed vines draping the trail in living curtains and ancient trees arching overhead like silent sentinels. Patches of sunlight revealed clusters of flowering vines, orchids clinging to bark in surreal hues of purple and white. Marcus's gaze lingered on their fragile beauty before returning to the path. A split-second distraction here could undo hours of healing. Mid-morning heat intensified, and Marcus's throat parched. He paused beside a mossy boulder head, throbbing slightly from exertion. The tribesman knelt, producing a carved wooden cup from his pack and holding it beneath a dripping seep in the rock face. Clear water spilled into the cup, and he handed it to Marcus with a nod. Gratefully, Marcus drank the cool liquid, sliding down his fevered throat like a benediction. He rinsed his bandaged calf gently, careful not to disturb the healing skin. Resuming the march, the gradient eased into a gentler slope before plunging toward the valley below. Beneath them, the forest canopy spread like an endless green sea. Far off, a ribbon of smoke rose above treetops, evidence of human settlement near the medical outpost. Marcus allowed himself a flicker of optimism, the sight fueling his weary legs with renewed energy. They approached a rocky outcrop where the path became a scramble over flattened slabs. The tribesmen led, testing each rock's stability with a swift kick before hopping across. Marcus followed, heart pounding, as he braced against gravity. His trekking pole, reassured by a sturdy bend in a nearby sapling, rooted him to solid ground. The tribesman glanced back and offered a firm thumbs-up encouragement that echoed through Marcus's mind. Noontime sun blazed overhead, filtering through gaps in the canopy to scorch the undergrowth. Marcus's shirt clung to his back, sweat beading along his hairline. He paused at a flat terrace beneath a sentinel tree, catching his breath. The tribesman produced a handful of toasted nuts and dried berries, energy-packed morsels that Marcus devoured in small bites. With each flavor burst crisp, earthy tangy, his strength incrementally returned. Replenished, they descended a steep slope, strewn with loose debris. Trees leaned at sharp angles, roots jutting like skeletal hands. Marcus leaned into each pole plant, transferring weight slowly from heel to toe to minimize jarring. Beside him, the tribesman offered silent guidance, tilting his head toward safer footholds, occasionally adjusting Marcus's pack strap to relieve shoulder tension. Late afternoon light slanted through the trees as they neared the valley floor. First, a trickle of stream water spotted the terrain, then a widening creek that gurgled over smooth stones. The tribesman knelt and cupped water to Marcus's parched lips. Marcus returned the favor, wiping his companion's brow with a cool cloth. In this shared act, the boundaries between rescuer and rescued blurred, their journey now inseparable. They crossed the creek on stepping stones, each careful hop a dance of balance. Marcus's calf protested with a flash of pain, but he pressed forward, breath steady. The tribesman guided him to a fallen log, serving as a natural bridge, then steadied him as he inched across boots gripping slippery moss. Once safe, Marcus exhaled, body shaking with relief and exertion. Beyond the creek, the path opened onto a small clearing where dirt tracks marked by tire ruts led toward distant smoke. Marcus recognized the signs of a service road used by forest vehicles. His pace quickened, driven by the promise of medical aid. The tribesman slowed alongside him, matching stride and offering a supportive hand, an unspoken gesture of solidarity. As dusk approached, the sun dipped beneath the horizon, turning sky hues to lavender and rose. Marcus spotted a faint glow of lantern at the edge of a wooden fence, an outpost that sat perched on a small plateau overlooking the river valley. He managed a weary grin voice, rasping with gratitude. Almost there. The tribesman nodded, his dark eyes gleaming in the twilight. They crossed the final stretch, a gentle slope lined with palms and slender eucalypts. The scent of burning wood drifted on cooling air, guiding them to the outpost's open gate, where a lone ranger waited, silhouette outlined by lantern light. Relief washed through Marcus as stronger hands reached for him, ushering him toward a waiting medical jeep. Before stepping forward, Marcus turned to the tribesman, voice thick with emotion. "I owe you my life." The tribesman inclined his head, pressing the carved wooden cup into Marcus's hand, a sign of respect and gratitude in his culture. Marcus clutched it to his chest, tears stinging his eyes. A ranger settled Marcus into the jeep's back seat, bandages inspected and IV line reconnected. The engine rumbled to life, and in that moment, engulfed by the warm glow of lamplight and the comforting rumble of wheels, Marcus felt the full arc of his journey, from Venom's fangs to community's embrace, from isolation's terror to shared triumph. As the Jeep plunged into the darkness toward the medical outpost's lights, Marcus closed his eyes, heart swelling with gratitude and relief. The Jeep's headlights carved through the pre-dawn darkness as Marcus lay back against the vinyl seat, body fatigued yet alert. His calf throbbed beneath fresh bandages, and the antiseptic scent of the medevac outpost clung to the night air. The ranger guided the Jeep onto a dirt road leading to a cluster of low-slung buildings beneath a canopy of eucalyptus. Faint glows and curtained windows marked the outpost's makeshift clinic. Marcus swung his legs onto the gravel courtyard boots, crunching softly. A medic with a headlamp approached her silhouette, framed by the clinic's dim interior light. Without pause, she knelt beside him, gently helping him onto a stretcher. His heart pounded partly from exertion, partly from the knowledge that antivenom lay within these walls. He had stabilized himself through improvised first aid and a grueling trek, but only that serum could halt the venom's corrosive progress. He inhaled, summoning calm. Inside the clinic, fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead. A long folding table held rows of vials, syringes, and tubing. The medic transferred Marcus to a narrow cot pillows propping his head. He watched as she signaled to her partner, who selected a large amber vial labeled hemotoxin antiserum and carefully drew its contents into a sterile syringe. The vial's glass glistened with hope and dread. Marcus clenched the cot's edge as the needle neared his vein. Almost there, the medic murmured voice a steady anchor in the clinical whirl. She anchored his arm and inserted the needle with precise calm. He flinched as the first cold drip of clear liquid entered his bloodstream. A slow ache bloomed in his shoulder, then spread across his limb in warm pulses. He gritted his teeth, willing the discomfort to pass. The venom's hemotoxins, once free to tear at blood vessels and tissue, now faced molecules in the antivenom designed to bind and neutralize them. As the infusion began its careful drip, Marcus's vision swam with exhaustion. He blinked against the harsh lights and focused on the medic's face, sympathetic, professional. "You're doing great," she said, adjusting the flow rate. "It'll take a few hours to work through your system, but you've already come so far." Her reassurance felt like a lifeline. Despite the ache at the infusion site, a cautious optimism stirred. The clinic was otherwise silent, except for the gentle hiss of oxygen canisters and the murmur of distant conversation beyond curtained doorways. Marcus closed his eyes, mind drifting to the moment when the tribesman had tended his wounds with herbal paste. There by firelight, in a bamboo hut, trust had been forged between two strangers separated by language and culture. Now, in this sterile cabin, trust transferred to modern medicine's promise. Both healers, one ancient, one contemporary, worked in tandem across space and time to preserve his life. A sudden warmth blossomed in Marcus's chest, a sign of antibodies binding venom proteins. Yet alongside relief edged a flicker of terror. What if he suffered an allergic reaction? He recalled accounts of anaphylaxis rash, wheezing, a plummeting blood pressure that could kill faster than venom. He flexed his fingers, tested his breathing, and found both steady. A bead of sweat gathered at his hairline. He licked cracked lips and pressed a gloved hand to his forehead, feeling heat, but no sudden rash. The medic checked his vital signs every 10 minutes. Blood pressure firming, heart rate easing from its earlier sprint temperature, holding steady. Each reading offered a small affirmation. Marcus exhaled through his nose, relief washing across his features. Yet, as calm settled, so did fatigue. His eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted between half-consciousness and wakefulness, each moment punctuated by the quiet drip of antivenom. In the haze, he remembered the herd of monkeys that fled at his bite site, their warning chitter echoing in his ears. The pang of gratitude to those animals for alerting him to the tribesmen for acting swiftly, and now to these medics for delivering anti-venom united in a circle of life-saving intent. He felt humbled by the chain of events that had converged to keep him alive. Hours passed in measured intervals. The medics rotated shifts, each offering brief updates. Now 100 bells and 400 ml remaining. No sign of adverse reaction. Continue monitoring urine output for hemoglobin. Each note, clinical and precise, steadied Marcus's spirit. His calf, once pulsing with venom-fueled agony, cooled to a firm ache as swelling receded. Veins that had threatened to hemorrhage now lay calm beneath pale skin. At one point, Marcus heard the faint rattle of a glass bottle beyond the curtain. A doctor, clipboard in hand, stepped into the cot's light. He offered a warm nod. Antivenom is working. We'll continue the infusion and then keep you under observation tonight. If all goes well by morning, we'll see improved coagulation profiles and reduced local tissue damage. He tapped the chart. Your hematocrit levels are rising, indicating plasma binding, good sign. Marcus's throat tightened with gratitude. He managed a weak nod voice, reserved for when full consciousness returned. Inside, a swirl of emotions spun: relief, gratitude, exhaustion, and something deeper wonder at the interplay of nature's danger and healing. The same forest that concealed lethal snakes had yielded the tribesmen's medicine. The distant outpost had pooled international resources, trained medics, anti-venom supply to counteract the jungle's perils. Survival, he realized, was rarely solitary. It was communal, woven through interactions across cultures and continents. As night deepened, the clinic dimmed its overhead lights, relying on task lamps for charting and monitoring. Marcus hovered at the edge of sleep, clinging to consciousness to ensure no crisis erupted. The cocoon of care enveloped him, tubes, charts, gentle voices. Finally, he surrendered, drifting into a restful sleep, free of nightmares. He awoke at dawn to the soft chatter of medics preparing breakfast trays. Sunlight filtered through a high, narrow window, painting a golden line across his bed. Marcus flexed fingers and toes, the absence of burning pain startlingly welcome. He swung his legs over the side of the cot and sat upright, steadied by supple muscles where stiffness had threatened immobilization. The anti-venom had done its work. A nurse entered with a cup of tea. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, setting the tray down. "How do you feel?" He lifted the cup, inhaling the fragrant steam. "Thank you," he whispered, voice stronger. "I feel alive." Her smile was a sunrise. "That's exactly what we aim for." He sipped tasting bittersweet tea laced with honey, stark contrast to the herbal brews of the tribesmen, yet both carried healing power. Marcus gazed at the vial of antivenom emptied on the table, then at the small wooden cup from the tribesman resting beside it. He realized that the dawn had brought not only physical relief, but a profound merging of ancient and modern cures of human ingenuity and communal care. He held both cups in his hands, one carved from wood, the other porcelain, and traced their rims. In that simple gesture, he acknowledged the path that had delivered him from the Plateau jungle's brink, an alliance of wild compassion and clinical expertise. As he set the cups down, Marcus felt a trembling gratitude settle deep in his chest, a quiet vow that he would honor both healers who had given him life. The hospital's late afternoon light draped the ward in a warm glow as Marcus walked the corridor unaided each step, a testament to his regained strength. The sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint aroma of eucalyptus from the courtyard trees visible beyond the windows, a reminder of the plateau's towering canopy that once both entrapped and enchanted him. His calf felt firm beneath the light fabric of his shorts, the mottled bruising from the bite now fading into pale lavender. Each flex and extension carried only the memory of pain, not its sting. Nurses paused to offer congratulations and encouragement. He nodded graciously, gratitude swelling in his chest. In this place of clinical efficiency, his journey had been distilled into charts and vital signs. Yet every lab result and therapy session echoed the broader narrative of survival, the wild's indifference met by human compassion, ancient remedies blending with modern medicine, and personal resolve intertwined with collective care. He reached his room and sat at the bedside table where two cups rested side by side, the polished wooden cup given by the tribesmen and the porcelain teacup of honeyed brew. Between them lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with inked observations of orchids, animal tracks, and now the harrowing account of venom, fear, and rescue. Marcus opened to a blank page, fingertips tracing the smooth surface as he prepared to capture this final chapter. His reflection to himself mattered less than the story these cups told one of a stranger's selfless aid beneath the jungle's shadows, the other of skilled hands administering life-saving anti-venom beneath fluorescent lights. Marcus recognized that both were chapters of the same saga, a testament to humanity's capacity to heal, whether through whispered chants or precise injections. He sipped from each cup, savoring their distinct warmth. The wooden cup's rough grain carried him back to the tribesman's medicine hut, the glow of embers, the murmur of healing chants, the scent of crushed leaves. The porcelain cup's smooth rim brought him to this very ward, soft chatter of staff-measured drip of IV fluids, and the taste of honeyed tea that soothed his throat. These moments, disparate in time and place, converged in his hands. Leaning back, Marcus closed his eyes and allowed himself a long exhale. Gratitude swelled for every soul woven into his rescue, the flock of monkeys whose alarm preceded the strike, the survival guide's teachings that prepared him, the tribesman and elder who applied an ancient knowledge, the medevac crew who carried him skyward, and the hospital team who administered antivenom and therapy. Each had been a lifeline. Pulling his journal onto his lap, he began to write not merely for posterity, but as an act of homage, ink flowing in rhythms echoing his heartbeats. He wrote of lessons learned about the Plateau's silent dangers, the paradox of isolation and solidarity, and the profound truth that survival is never solo. As he penned the story, he felt the final threads of fear unwind, replaced by a quiet confidence that though nature's perils remained ever present, so too did humanity's capacity for compassion and connection. Outside, the evening sky deepened to indigo. Marcus closed his journal, knowing the narrative was complete, yet also realizing that his life's story would carry this experience forward, shaping the man he would become. He placed a hand on each cup, a silent vow to honor those who saved him by living boldly, sharing gratitude, and forging unexpected alliances wherever he journeyed next. Soft shadows lengthened in the ward as the day's bustle eased into gentle hush. Marcus lay back against crisp sheets, eyelids heavy, mind released from urgency. In this moment, every tension unwound, every thought slowed, and each breath grew deep and unhurried. The distant drone of hospital equipment softened into a lullaby, and the faint rustle of nurses' footsteps became a gentle accompaniment to his fading awareness. He imagined the Plateau's emerald waves at dawn, cool mist rising off the lagoon, the hush of the forest broken only by bird song. There, sunlight filtered through jeweled leaves, casting speckled patterns on mossy stones. In his memory, the jungle stood timeless, a living cathedral where both peril and beauty converged. Yet those images now felt distant, like a dream slipping into twilight. His body, once fraught with panic and pain, lay cradled in protective stillness. Muscles once taut with fear melt into comfort. The tourniquet's constricting grip was gone, replaced by the warm caress of healing. His breath rose and fell in smooth arcs each exhale, releasing the last echoes of dread. Every pulse affirmed the miracle of continued life. He sensed the presence of his rescuers in a chorus of gratitude. The tribesmen's steady hands, the elders' whispered blessings, the medevac team's urgency, and the hospital staff's quiet competence all wove a tapestry of compassion that cradled him. Their voices, though distant now, resonated as an enduring bridge between his fear and his peace. As darkness settled softly beyond the window, Marcus surrendered to the gentle current of rest. His last conscious thought whispered a promise to carry these lessons like lanterns in his heart, guiding him through every path, known and unknown. Then, as shadows dissolved into dreams, he slipped into tranquil sleep, held within the steady embrace of gratitude and the tender hope of new dawns.